Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city, at WFOY 1240 AM studios. Through the power of the internet, this program is being streamed worldwide on 1240news.com. The show will also be archived on rawauctions.com, as they are the host of this program. Additionally, this show will be posted on youtube.com. We're going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today. To help us out, we've got several real estate and auction leaders calling in, and very excited to be with you on this Friday. It's a beautiful day in St. Augustine. We're going to have J.J. Dower, who is the CEO of MarkNet Alliance, which is a group of 50 auction firms going to be calling in. He's also the vice president of the National Auctioneers Association, and he's a partner of Ayers Auction and Realty in Tennessee. We've got some other things we're going to be talking about. I was in Washington, D.C. last week. I got a chance to meet with a couple of congressmen, Congressman Billy Long from Missouri, who is a very big supporter of auctions. I also got a chance to sit down with Congressman Jeff Duncan, who is a very, very big supporter of auctions. Talked to them for, I'm going to say 5, 10, 15 minutes, talking about government surplus properties, why there's a need to sell these properties, why there is a need to use auctions. Using auctions is the transparent way. It is the open, honest, fair way to let everybody get involved. There's no backdoor dealings. Everyone knows it's available. Everybody can raise their hand or put a bid in on the internet. It is, again, open and above board. And when you're dealing with a government property, you need to do that. And so very excited that I had a chance to sit down with them and kind of air my views and find out that they were exactly on the same target. As you might know, in the past couple months, a bill from Congressman Jeff Denham passed in the House, and it passed overwhelmingly. It was called H.R. 1734. It is the Civilian Property Realignment Act, and this is a bill that is aimed at trying to sell these government surplus properties that are not doing anything except costing American taxpayers money. And you would think at a time when people are looking at what the government is doing in regards to the budget and the fact that it is it's a great big deficit. You've got properties that you are not using, and they are costing millions of dollars just to keep them secure and maintained each year. And I don't think American taxpayers know that. There's always the post office I bring up that is in Washington, D.C., that for 10 years was costing the American taxpayer $6 million a year. That's $60 million, folks. Let's go to our lines. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug. J.J. Dower. How are you, Doug?
J.J., thank you so much for calling in, and you are a busy man. You have a lot of hats, and you've been traveling, getting your frequent flyer points, I'm sure. Tell us about what you do and where you're from, J.J.
Well, Doug, I'm from La Follette, Tennessee, and I'm a partner in a company out here called Ayers Auction, and I was one of the original 3 founding members of a company called MarkNet Alliance, which is based out of Nokomis, Illinois, and I'm now the CEO of MarkNet. So I spend a lot of time in Illinois, and MarkNet has 50 member companies in 26 states. So between 50 companies in 26 states. I spend a lot of time on the road with them. But then my third job, I guess you'd say, is I'm vice president of the National Auctioneers Association, which has nearly 4,000 members across the country and a few other countries. So I get to spend a lot of time with the NAA, traveling back and forth to the headquarters in Overland Park, and plus visiting the different states, their state conventions during the winter and summer months. So you're right, I do spend a lot of time on the airline.
Well, let's go one by one. First of all, let's talk about your auction firm in Tennessee. Again, where is it, and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, our company is Ayers Auction Real Estate. We have two locations in Tennessee, La Follette and Oneida. My father-in-law, Hack Ayers, started our firm in 1957. And so we've been primarily a real estate auction company, and throughout the years, it's been mostly selling land. So we're in East Tennessee, and so we pretty much covered the East Tennessee and the southeastern Kentucky area, and have a good time doing that. And that would be the highlight of who we are there.
Mm-hmm. And then MarkNet Alliance. Tell us a little bit more about that. What kind of auctions do they do? 50 firms, that's a lot of companies, so that's a national presence. Tell us why people are joining MarkNet Alliance.
Well, and that's it's really taken off. It's only been in existence 5 years now, and it kind of started with three buddies getting together and inviting other buddies to join. But we're 50 auction companies in 26 states, and we did 5,000 auctions last year. I think we'll do a little better than that this year. Probably 3,000 of those were online auctions, or at least had some kind of online bidding platform available for them. And our companies sell everything from multi-million-dollar real estate deals to the typical estate sale. It's a pretty diverse group, and equipment and vehicles and everything else in between. So it's a kind of an interesting concept, and the attraction for the member companies wanting to join is to maintain their local presence with a national presence, and maintain their name, but be associated with a national name. And we provide our members with a lot of cool technology tools, everything from an online bidding platform to the only online-only multi-par bidding platform that exists today, and then some what we call workspace software, which is an enterprise management tool to manage these projects. And we have a lot of companies, as with your affiliation with RAL, they're doing a couple hundred auctions at a time, so that enterprise management deal really helps them keep up with what's going on with those existing projects.
Well, it's very interesting because, yes, I'm with Rowell Auctions, and we are one of the member firms, but I didn't really know that much about MarkNet. I've been with Rowell Auctions for a little over a year, and have enjoyed my time. But to be able to be part of a group that does, what do you say, 5,000 different auctions over the year, that becomes a go-to site for real estate brokers, investors, and so now you have people coming to this website and basically helping every auction because they come from throughout the world. Tell us about how it helps a member firm to have all that attention, and to tell them and to tell their sellers, this is what we're doing to promote your property.
Yeah, and you're correct all the way around there, Doug. MarkNet averages, we have become a go-to website for auction sale information now. During a 30-day window, we're going to have 540,000 unique visitors, not hits. That's unique people, first-time visitors. Our investor list now is up to nearly 400,000 names, and we've had 75, somewhere between 75 and 80,000. It's going up daily. People actually register and bid on our products. So, and they're from all 50 states and foreign countries, and one of my member companies in Tennessee says that he's nationwide home by five. He's been selling property in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Had a guy in Iran buy 5 or 6 pieces from him. So, there's no limit now with the World Wide Web who you can do business with.
Well, it is very unique to see a property that maybe it's just a retail center and maybe worth $200,000, and whether it's in Tennessee or Oklahoma or Massachusetts or California, you wouldn't think that would have as much attention from the outlying areas. You'd think it'd be kind of a local deal, and then you're looking at the information from people who are interested in bidding and are bidders, and my God, they're from around the world. Nothing saying about just the 50 states. You're getting attention around the world.
Yeah, I was looking at some stats this morning before we talked. MarkNet has a national sale where on June the 1st, and it's online only, and mostly bank assets. And we're selling 100-some pieces of property that day on June the 1st. So, you're still a couple, it's 2 weeks from today when the bidding ends, and yet, there's people registering. And I noticed that one of the particular companies had 45 registered bidders for a piece of property, but only 5 of them was from their state. 40 of them had come from other states. So, it's kind of amazing, how the trade begins and how it happens. So, with what we're doing, you're not only selling property, and your bidders are no longer the neighbors in the community. They're people throughout the county, state, and country. So it's an interesting concept, and it's what we've done. And you've been around a long time, like I have, Doug. What's evolved in our industry is truly amazing, and how things are conducted now to what they used to be. It changes. It's constantly changing, even steady.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I'm seeing, which is a wonderful thing, not only for buyers but for sellers, is that I'm seeing more and more absolute auctions. Tell us what absolute auctions are, and tell us why that's important for a success of an auction.
That market out.
You're breaking up there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Being in East Tennessee today, and so we hills and hollers is what we're made of, and so now we're back on the hill.
Okay.
But the word absolute is what motivates the buyer to come to the sale and let him know that something's going to happen, so he's not wasting his time, and makes it worth his time to follow. But even from the seller standpoint, that's what sets your product out from everything else that's out there on the market, and it creates more attention for your product. And in my opinion, it's going to bring more money, and on an auction sale has always been the most transparent method to sell an item, where everyone knows what's going on, and it's all laid right out there. There's no games. It's everything's out in front of everyone. So an auction sale is going to bring the fair market value, and an absolute auction just helps create that environment. Well,
I was in Washington, D.C. It's a good segue here. Last week, I've kind of taken a personal interest in this government surplus property initiative that President Obama started with, and a bill got passed just a couple months ago, H.R. 1734, in the House, and now they're trying to move it through the Senate and get it passed. But government surplus properties is the most logical thing for an auction, and I was able to meet with Congressman Billy Long while I was up there, and also Congressman Jeff Duncan. Again, two very big supporters of the auction method, and was very pleased that it seems it's getting a little bit more initiative and enthusiasm. I don't know if it's going to get through the Senate. I don't know if anything gets through the Senate these days, but a great thing for auctions is a possibility to help the government sell properties that they do not use. And of course, I always bring up the post office in Washington, D.C. that's sat vacant for 10 years, costing the American taxpayer $6 million a year. And I don't think American taxpayers realize that one property costs them $60 million a year as they're trying to figure out what to do with it. So tell me your take, and I know you're the number 2 person with the National Auctioneers Association. I mean, is this a no-brainer for the government to say, hey, let's sell these properties, let's help the budget, let's get it off the American taxpayers' bill every year? And what's your take on that, JJ?
Well, yeah, I mean, Doug, it's kind of a no-brainer. The auction method is obviously the most fair method to liquidate these assets. It's the most transparent. It's out there for the world to see and the public. But what it does from the government standpoint, it takes all these dead assets off the books that they're spending money to maintain. But also, it puts these properties on local tax rolls, help providing revenue for counties and states now that are in desperate need of revenue also. But it takes an asset that's sitting still for 10 years, like the post office building, and puts it in the hands of the public sector where it can be actually used and utilized for something. I mean, it's a job creator, too.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's just no doubt about it that the auction method is the way to go to give all tax-paying citizens an opportunity to buy these assets and, not create a bundling deal to where you sell some investment firm a bunch of government assets they go out and get rich on.
Yep.
This is a way for, the investor will still have the opportunity to bid. But, I mean, it'll give the investor the opportunity, and it'll give the end user an opportunity to own one of these assets and put it in taxpayers' hands instead of the taxpayers paying for the government for it to sit still.
Well, Congressman Duncan was on the show a couple of weeks ago and said the exact same thing, is that his hope is that it would not be bundled and grouped in portfolios. And again, this 14,000 properties that President Obama and his staff have come up with that are not being used. 14,000. Now, that's a drop in a hat because the government is the biggest landlord in the world. They have upwards to 1 million properties, believe it or not, across the country. But 14,000 properties could really make a dent, and numbers have been as high as $15 billion that it would save the American taxpayer. That's serious money. So what Congressman Duncan said is, let's not have 1,000 properties at a time go to this investment firm on Wall Street, and another 1,000, be sold to a banking group in California. Let's not do that, because you know what? That property in the hometown, there's somebody right next to them that have been trying to, maybe buy it and maybe expand their business, and to actually delete them from the equation is just not the right thing.
No, I mean, it's obviously anytime you can have local expansion and an opportunity to create local activity and local jobs, that's what stimulates the economy. The economy has always been driven by small business, and unfortunately in today's world we've kind of got turned upside down a little bit, where small business guys having a hard time, and during this rough time the larger players in the world are getting rich while the rest of us are getting poorer. So that's create the opportunity for the for the guy to have an opportunity he hasn't had because that asset's been tied up by the government, no opportunity to buy it or trade on it or use it. And so I think it's kind of a no-brainer that that's the way to liquidate these assets. And the way to liquidate them is, to use people who have local market knowledge and presence and the national means to bring the most money in for the government and the taxpayers and give everybody an opportunity to play the game.
Now, JJ, again, you've been a huge proponent of auctions throughout your career. You are right now the number 2 person with the NAA, the National Auctioneers Association. Is that a thing where you eventually become the number 1 person, or is that a new election, or what is that all about?
Well, come July at our national conference and show in Spokane, Washington this year, I will be inducted as president. So we're down on to about the last 5 or 6 weeks here before it kicks up another gear for me. But I won't have to run for another office. I will automatically be president come July in Spokane.
Well deserved, and looking forward to your tenure there. How can people get a hold of you, JJ? Because you're always a great interview and a great leader in the auction profession.
Well, the easiest way now is email at jj@marknetalliance.com. You can visit our website at www.marknetalliance.com, or you can actually call my cell phone, 423-592-7067.
And you can answer except when you're on a plane, right?
That'd be right.
JJ, thank you so much for calling in. Always a pleasure. You've been a frequent call-in guest to the show, and your thoughts, along with the congressman that I met last week up in Washington, D.C., we're steadily gaining ground on the auction profession to utilize that method as the most fair and most transparent way to sell real estate across the country. So, JJ, have a great weekend, and you take care.
You too, Doug. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That was JJ Dower. JJ, as I said, has a lot of hats. He is the CEO of MarkNet Alliance, and that's marknetalliance.com. They are a group of 50 different auction firms in 26 different states. They do 5,000 auctions a year. They have 540,000 unique visitors each month. That's just amazing to me. And so he's also vice president of the National Auctioneers Association and will become president in July. So very thrilled to have him on. And last but not least, his real job, he is a partner of Ayers Auction and Realty in Lafayette, Tennessee. I thank him for being on the show. He's always been a big supporter of not only the show but government auctions. We're going to go for a quick break. We will be back. We're going to be talking more about my trip in Washington, D.C., who I met with, and what their feelings are about selling these government surplus properties. All right, we're back. Again, you're listening to the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. We just had a great interview, JJ Dower. JJ is, again, the number 2 person in the National Auctioneers Association, but in July, he will be the number 1 person. He will be the president of the National Auctioneers Association. And again, he's been a big supporter of the show, and also somebody that knows what's happening in Washington, D.C., so always pleased to hear from him. I talked a little bit about Washington, D.C. I want to spend the rest of the show talking about what we need to do. Our call-in number is 904-797-1919, 904-797-1919. Let me tell you how this all came about. I'm in the auction business, have been for 25 years. My specialty has been government auctions for the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the RTC, which is some of those of you who remember, is a Resolution Trust Corporation, which was an organization built from the fact that there were many savings and loans that failed in the early 90s, and thousands of assets were auctioned off. United States Marshal Service, United States bankruptcy courts. Actually, have worked for FISLIC before, which is a group that has now gone out of business, which is the insurance company for savings and loans, of course. And SBA and many other groups, Fannie Mae. And so my thing is government auctions. That's what I love to do, and I think it's important as a taxpayer that when there's government assets, they need to be auctioned. They need to be sold in a method where everybody sees what's happening, and that's an auction. You're doing the most fairest, most transparent sales method known to mankind in the auction method. Everybody gets a chance to raise their hand until they don't want to do it anymore. Everybody has the same information as they did as everybody does. So what happened, it was a little more than a year ago, and I'm listening to President Obama's State of the Union address, and this was in 2011. And what he said was that we need to help balance the budget, and so therefore we are going to need to sell some of these unused properties that have been languishing in the system, have not been used. And so he talked about that in the State of the Union address, and then he came back like a couple months later, and I think it was around Valentine's Day, as a matter of fact, last year, and he was talking about his budget and his budget address. It was actually in Baltimore, Maryland, and his quote is, "To take just one example, by getting rid of 14,000 office buildings, lots, and government-owned properties we no longer need, we can save taxpayers billions of dollars." Billions of dollars. So I said, myself, man, let me kind of check up on that and see what's happening. And really, I didn't get any information. Looked on the website, went through Google, did everything I could to find out what's happening with these properties, and I got a hit because there was something on the newspaper called on www.thehill.com. It's a newspaper that's in Washington, D.C., The Hill, and the title is GOP Senator to Propose Auction of Federal Properties to Pay Down Deficit. This was written by a writer called Josiah Ryan. It was on August 4th. And I'm going to read it verbatim because what got me started to going up to Washington, D.C. and trying to push this. Senator Scott Brown of Massachusetts planned to propose legislation that would order the auction of up to 45,000 unused or underused government properties in order to raise funds to reduce the nation's deficit, the Boston Herald reported on Thursday. Brown said he expects the legislation could raise up to $15 billion toward deficit reduction while streamlining the management of federal assets. There is a tremendous amount of surplus property, Brown said. We could save over $15 billion. That's real money. We'd be converting underutilized real estate into reductions in the federal deficit. The legislation would open and would appoint a 7-person commission to select properties and organize the sale. According to a description of the legislation released by Brown's office, the chairman of that commission would require confirmation by the Senate. The bill would be co-sponsored by Representative Jeff Denham, California, and could be as included in one of the yet-to-be-determined deficit-cutting measures in next year's budget. That's pretty exciting. So I went up to, that was in August, I went up to Washington, D.C. with my boss, Thomas Rowell, who's the CEO of Rowell Auctions, which is a national firm. And we decided to talk to people up there in regards to what is this bill all about? What kind of support has it got? Seems like a no-brainer, but tell us a little bit about it. And of course, we're up there trying to promote the auction method, and we're promoting ourselves. Rowell Auctions, of course, but we wanted to find out what the deal was. And so we had great meetings. I mean, anytime you think that you can't make a difference, well, you can. And we ended up going to Congressman Denham's office. We met with Brett Manley, his legislative director, and he kind of gave us the real deal on what was happening. Again, that's in the House side. Then we went to the Senate side, Senator Brown's office, which, again, he's from Boston, Massachusetts, the Massachusetts area, and met with Brandon Aitchison, who's his staff person on this. And they talked about what needed to be done and who needs to support it. We then went to the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, and we talked to them about what's needed. We also went to the office of, the GAO, General Accounting Office, to find out. We went to GSA, the General Services Administration, to talk to them, their feelings. And so we spent some time and money and trying to find out, is there any chance that the American taxpayer might get some relief by selling some of these properties? And I will bring it up again. There is a property in Washington, D.C., and it's just one of many, and if we have time, I'll go over some of these properties, but there's a property in Washington, D.C. It's an old post office, and if you've ever been in Washington, D.C., I mean, buildings are like complete blocks. They're huge, and this is just one of them. And we found out that this property hasn't been used for 10 years. And then listen to this. It costs the American taxpayer $6 million a year to keep it secure, to keep it maintained, to make sure that there's no vandalism. Just an amazing amount of money. Now, 6 million times 10, that's $60 million. So very interesting. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back, and I'm going to be talking again about the government surplus properties, this bill, what you can do. Our call-in number is 904-797-1919. But let's take a quick break.
MarkNet Alliance is a national, membership-based network of 41 auction companies. Our companies are successful auction professionals with proven track records and thriving businesses. The MarkNet companies have a staff of over 540 employees who are working hard every day to meet the goals of their clients during our ever-changing economy. MarkNet companies are able to achieve these goals through cutting-edge technologies and ever-growing investor pools. To view the hundreds of auctions currently being conducted, or for more information, visit marknetalliance.com.
All right, we're back listening to the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I am your host, Doug Dennison. Again, the radio show mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. We've been doing this for more than a year. We've talked about the different auction processes. J.J. Dower earlier in the show talked about the reason why an absolute auction works so effectively for a seller and for a buyer. There are many auctions that are not sold absolute, and that doesn't get everybody out to play. And when you promote something that's going to be sold absolute, it means it's going to be sold to the highest bidder regardless of price, no minimums, no reserves. So if you're at all interested in this property, you're going to take the time and the effort to do your due diligence, to bring a check out of your cashier's check, maybe out of your whatever, IRA, pension fund, whatever you do to get involved, because you know that it's going to be sold no matter what. And as I was talking to J.J. Dower, it seems like the tide has turned. There's more and more absolute auctions coming on board. MarkNet Alliance talked about, JJ talked about the fact that they had 5,000 auctions last year with MarkNetAlliance.com. So very, very important. So getting back to Washington, D.C., met with all of these groups, met with different Congress people, different senator offices, and on this show, because of the fact that this is such a hot topic, it's an election year, our deficit is just terrible as far as the budget is concerned. So this is a no-brainer, folks. You are selling property that will help the budget. They're not being used, these properties. These are office buildings, they're warehouses, they're land parcels. This has nothing to do with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. These are not residential homes. These are government surplus properties that have office buildings, and there's courthouses that aren't being used, and there's new ones being put up right beside them, and nothing being done with the one that just got vacated. So we need to really do something about that. It takes a lot of money to take care of a property, and I'm going to tell you a little story. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, the state of Michigan had a psychiatric facility, a hospital that hadn't been used for 4 or 5 years. And they were having budget problems for the state too. And they said, okay, let's try to sell this. And it was a very difficult sale because they had leases, they had an active oil well on the property, there was a state of police shooting grounds right next to it, it had asbestos, it had underground tunnels. It was kind of a mess, but it was a big property. It was 400 plus acres, and I was the auction project manager for that auction. We got $31 million for the sale. It was a great sale. Have a really good effort there on all parts, and that was the local broker, the broker who brought the buyer. Again, we work with brokers all the time. It's very important that we do that. But I found out later, a couple years later, that besides giving $31 million to the state of Michigan for a property that they did not use, they were spending $500,000 a year in upkeep and holding cost for that property. So if they had it for 5 or 6 years, that's $3 million that they each year they would have to pay out of their budget to keep a property that they were no longer going to use, that they didn't want to use, had no plan for, and it took them 6 years to come up with a plan for an auction that we sold the property for $31 million. That is on the state level. It's the same process for the federal government. That's what we're talking about. And in fact, it's the same process for counties and cities. If you have properties that are being unused, then you've got wasted money, wasted American taxpayer money. And so it's just a shame, and it's a no-brainer that we should be talking to our elected representatives on state, local, and federal, and say, hey, what about unused properties? What are we doing with them? And let the elected official find out. You know, if you're not using them, then if you have no plan to use them, sell them. What's it cost to keep these properties, elected official? How much? And I'm paying that as an American taxpayer? That's not right. That's not right. So, since we've generated some enthusiasm up there, and I'm not saying me or my boss or anyone else, although I've been up to Washington, D.C. 3 times now in the last 7 months, to find out what's happening and where we are. We're getting at least a push. In fact, Congressman Dennison has been the leader in the House side and has done a fantastic job in really pushing the fact that this needs to be done. He's from California. He's a Republican. And I'm not going back and forth on Democrats, Republican, but he pushed this, and so it passed in the House of Representatives, and it passed very, very well, overwhelmingly. And so it's now going to the Senate, where Senator Brown, which I mentioned before from the Boston area, has teamed up with Senator Warner, who I believe is from Virginia, and they are now pushing to get it through the House. There's differences in what they want to do there. That's fine. You know, it takes longer, but it's fine. Let them sit down. Let them iron out between the House and the Senate how it can work for the benefit of the American taxpayer. That's very, very important. And so that's what's happening up in Washington, D.C. I would urge you to do something about it. And that means to go to your elected official and say, hey, if there's properties that are not being used, President Obama, a Democrat, brought it up. The House, which is Republican based right now, they have the majority. They've passed a bill to do this. And now the Senate, which is a Democrat group, they are trying to do something and maybe mesh between the two, Senate and House and Republican and Democrat, to do something for the American taxpayer. And the American taxpayer could use a break, folks. Let's stop playing games. Let's get this done. I was in Congressman John Mica's office up in Washington, D.C. last week. He had I'm going to say it's a 40, I'm looking at it right now. It's a 66-page report that talks about all of the properties that need to be sold, that need to be fixed, that need to be, maybe if there's a lease problem, renegotiated. I'm just going to go over a couple of them. This is Congressman Mica. He's the chair, the ranking member of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. He's with Thomas Petrie, John Duncan Jr., Frank Lobiondo, Bill Schuster, John Boozman, Mario Diaz-Balart. This was a group that put this 66-page, very good, very nice a document together. And the purpose of it was to show that there's properties that the government owns that are not being used. They need to sell. They need to, utilize them better. They need to save money. And the fact that it costs so much to, keep them as they are. And I'm gonna go over a couple of the properties. I've already talked about the old post office. It says here that the GSA loses $6.5 million per year in this partially vacant building in a prime location in D.C. I know they've got plans to now lease it out, which is a wonderful thing. Veterans Affairs, old VA hospital in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a vacant 141-year-old building, needs extensive upgrades to electrical system to accommodate a modern computer network. Excess VA space is costing the taxpayer $175 million annually. These aren't my figures, folks. These are figures from this group of congressmen. There's a federal office building in Bethesda, Maryland. Prime location, sat vacant for 8 years, and sold in a bad real estate market for less than a minimum suggested bid. Next one is a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., the Prettyman Courthouse and Bryant Annex that needs to be sold. Next one is the Wilkie Ferguson Jr. United States Federal Courthouse in Miami, Florida, that needs to be sold. Then there's another David Dyer Federal Building in the United States Courthouse in Miami, Florida. That is a historic building, abandoned and in disrepair after the new courthouse was built. All right, we need to sell these things. You're just getting a gist. I would suggest, because this is a great document, contacting Congressman John Mica from Florida, his office, and ask them to tell you how to get this 66-page report. And again, it's called Sitting on Our Assets: The Federal Government's Misuse of Taxpayer-Owned Assets. Let me read that to you one more time. This is a report and analysis from the United States House of Representatives. It's called Sitting on Our Assets: The Federal Government's Misuse of Taxpayer-Owned Assets. It's prepared by Republican staff, 111th Congress, October 2010. And this is very current, believe it or not, even though it's a year and a half old. This stuff is going on, and we need to sell these properties. I want to talk to you about Rao Auctions. They have 15 different auctions coming up. They are the sponsor of this show, and they are a national real estate auction firm that started in 1936. They do online auctions, on-site auctions, and ballroom auctions. They have offices in Florida, New Jersey, California, Georgia, and have alliances with auctioneers and real estate brokers across the country. They do government auctions, bank auctions, bankruptcy auctions, and much more. They've got a big auction schedule coming up, so check out their website at www.rawauctions.com. That's www.rawauctions.com, or you can call them at 800-323-8388. They have, I want to say, 15 to 18 auctions coming up. Some of these auctions are like 100 properties at a time. Bank-owned properties, a lot of them selling for absolute. We talked about this morning. Absolute means it sells regardless of price, no minimums, no reserves. You want to get involved in that. Again, that's rawauctions.com, and their telephone number is 800-323-8388. That's 800-323-8388. We have had a great show. We've talked about government surplus properties. We've talked to J.J. Dower, who in July will become president of the National Auctioneers Association, which is a great credit to him. He's also the CEO of MarkNet Alliance. MarkNetAlliance.com is a group of 50 different auctioneer firms that sell thousands of properties each year. It's a go-to site if you're looking for properties, if you're a broker, or if you are a real estate investor. You need to go on MarkNetAlliance.com. We are wrapping up the show. I want to thank everybody for listening. And again, J.J. Dower for being on our show. It's a great weekend. I thank you so much for again listening and adding a great deal to this show. You take care and have a great weekend.